What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be taking a deep look at the suppression mechanic in Battlefield 6 because it turns out after doing some testing, this is significantly more powerful than I initially thought, and I think these results will surprise many of you as well. So let's just dive right into this, and the first thing to point out with suppression in Battlefield 6 is it only has an impact on the enemy's health regeneration when you're suppressing them. This is different from many of the previous Battlefield games where it would increase the amount of sway that you experience, or it could even increase the amount of spread that your gun would have, so it would make your gun less accurate if you were being suppressed while firing. That doesn't happen at all in Battlefield 6. Additionally, in previous Battlefield games, suppression would tend to have quite a big visual impact on you, so it would make your screen quite blurry. It may even shake your screen around a little bit. And that isn't really happening in Battlefield 6 either. Like, you can see the effect is taking place, and the way to know that you have been suppressed by a bullet is this little indicator that you might see show up on the screen. It does show the direction the shot is coming from, and this is an indicator letting you know you've been suppressed. Now, when it comes to how this impacts our health regeneration, let's first take a look at our standard health regeneration when there's no suppression present. And with this, from the last damage that you've taken, there's a 5-second delay before you even start regenerating your health. And then when it comes to the regeneration itself, you regenerate at a rate of 10 HP per second. So in this case, I dealt 67 damage, and once he starts regenerating, it takes exactly 6.7 seconds to get back up to full health. Add that 5-second delay, and this was a total regeneration time in this scenario of 11.7 seconds from the last time he took damage. Now, like I said, that's just the control. That's the base health regeneration with no suppression present. Now, let's take a look at what suppression does. And what I found with this is every time a bullet suppresses you, it immediately resets your health regeneration delay. That 5-second delay, it sets that clock back to 0. And what I found with this is there's no limit to this. Meaning, if you keep getting suppressed every single time a bullet flies by that suppresses you, it will once again reset the timer on that 5-second health regeneration delay. And this means if a bullet suppresses you every 4.9 seconds on a steady basis, you will literally never regenerate health. And therefore, on the flip side of this, if you've dealt damage to an enemy player and they take cover, all you have to do is continue shooting around that cover. And as long as they stay within the suppression range, which we'll look at in just a little bit, you can just keep suppressing them and make it so they literally can't heal, with one key exception here, which we'll also look at shortly. Also, it is worth noting with this, if the player starts regenerating their health, so they go more than 5 seconds without being suppressed or taking damage, and they start that process of healing, if you suppress them during this time, it will stop that health regeneration and once again reset that 5-second delay. So now it's going to take another 5 seconds before they start healing again. So you can interrupt the health regeneration as well. Now, let's look at the key exception to this, and the counter to suppression here, effectively, is the supply bag or the supply pouch that the support players will have. With these, when you enter their radius or you throw one down at your feet if you are the support player, it immediately triggers your health regeneration, and this ignores any sort of suppression, meaning if you're being actively suppressed and you're hurt and you throw one of these bags down at your feet, that suppression doesn't matter anymore. You'll just immediately trigger the health regeneration, and even if they're still continuing to suppress you, it won't interrupt your health regeneration. You'll just continue to regenerate that health like you normally would if you weren't being suppressed. So that is effectively a full counter to suppression. Now, I also wanted to test the adrenaline injector just to see if this would also counteract the effects of suppression when it comes to health regeneration, and it turns out no, this has no impact on that whatsoever. As far as I can tell, it's only the supply bag and the supply pouch that can do this. Perhaps there's something else I'm overlooking here that would allow you to heal through this suppression, but these are at least going to be the primary methods of countering suppression. Now, the next big reason that suppression is more powerful than I thought, this is how big of a bubble around an enemy player you have to suppress them. It turns out all you have to do is have that bullet pass within 5 meters of them. That's a pretty big range, as you can see there. And this means behind a lot of forms of cover, they won't be able to escape your suppression. All you have to do is shoot around the edge of that cover or over the top as well, since this bubble completely surrounds the player and also applies over the top, not just to the sides. And you will continue suppressing them unless they can get 5 meters away from the edge of that cover where you're putting those bullets down. And I should also point out something that I was curious to test here. I thought perhaps different weapon classes would have different amounts of suppression. So I was thinking like LMGs would probably have the most amount of suppression with maybe the biggest bubble or the biggest range at which you could suppress players. And then something like a pistol would either not be able to suppress at all, or it would have like a significantly smaller range. However, based on my testing, it doesn't seem to matter what gun you're using. A pistol will suppress enemy players just as much as an LMG, although of course you have a smaller magazine and therefore that may limit things. LMGs tend to have much larger magazines, so you could argue that definitely improves your suppression potential. But at the end of the day, any gun can suppress as long as you have a bullet that passes within 5 meters of an enemy player. And this was all also quite surprising to me because when it comes to suppression in the game, I thought, and I'm sure many other people have this same thought, that the suppression effect only applies if you see that little pop-up on your screen that says enemy suppressed, and you get like 5 XP for doing that. And in order to get that to pop up, it seems like you have to fire continually fairly close to an enemy player to get that little pop-up to apply. In reality, that pop-up is irrelevant when it comes to actually suppressing the enemy player. Like I said, all you need is one bullet passing within 5 meters from any gun out there to suppress an enemy target. And as a result, even though this doesn't have the big effects that suppression has had in many previous Battlefield games, like increased spread or a huge visual effect that makes it much harder for them to see what's going on around them as they're being suppressed, at the end of the day, in many situations, you can ensure that an enemy player literally just can't ever heal, and this is absolutely going to change how I approach many situations. If I know I'm going to be pushing an enemy player after dealing damage to them and they've taken cover, and if I know it's going to take me at least 5 seconds to get to them and I want to push them, all I have to do is make sure I pop a bullet down range in their general direction while I'm on my way, and it will reset that 5-second timer, so once I do close that gap and get to them, their health is going to be just as low, and I'll be able to finish them off with ease. Unless they're a support player, of course, or if they have a support player nearby. Additionally, and I would say this is more the intention of suppression, if you're working with your teammates, this can also be incredibly valuable. If you see a teammate is pushing an enemy that has taken cover, you know that enemy has taken damage, well, now we know suppressing them is going to be helping that teammate out a ton. Way more than I initially thought before making this video. Because my impression of this, knowing that it had an impact on health regeneration, was that it would just be like a one-time delay. Like if you suppress them at one point, it just slightly increases that health regeneration delay, but continued suppression wouldn't have any additional effect on top of that. It was just, if you suppress them, then it would do that. And like I said earlier as well, I thought you had to actually see that icon pop up on your screen that says enemy suppressed with the 5 XP, and that's not the case at all. Now on the receiving end of this is also very important information to know. First off, this makes support that much more powerful in my eyes, because if you are getting actively suppressed and you're a support player, well, at least you can just throw that bag down at your feet and stop the suppression in its tracks. Additionally, what this means is you really want to keep an eye out for those little indicators that pop up on your screen that are letting you know that you are suppressed, especially when you've taken damage, of course. And I'm definitely going to be a lot more cautious re-challenging after being suppressed, because that regeneration gets delayed a lot more than I initially expected. And with that, that's pretty much it. That's going to wrap it up for today's video, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Now that you have a full understanding of how the suppression system works in Battlefield 6, how do you feel about it? Is it more powerful than you initially thought? Do you guys think it's powerful enough, or do you think there should be more effects present? On that note, personally, I wouldn't mind if there were more of a visual effect present while being suppressed. And I also wouldn't mind some additional suppression abilities against snipers, perhaps, like maybe increasing the amount of sway they're experiencing if you're putting shots down range and actively suppressing them. But outside of that, I am glad to see that it doesn't affect your weapon's accuracy for like the regular guns in the game. I always find that to be a very unnecessary and frustrating mechanic to have in the game, that you would be rewarded so heavily for missing your shots on enemy players and just shooting near them rather than actually hitting them. But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear what you guys think about this level of suppression in those comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.